I was born in Missouri and stayed there until I joined the Navy in 1932. No, I graduated from high school in the midst of the Great Depression, and I wasn't super patriotic. I didn't want to fight anybody, but that's about the only way that a high school graduate could be independent, was join the military. So that I was driven by economic reasons. I really didn't want to make a career out of it. In those days, the motto was join the Navy and see the world. So I wanted the adventure and travel, intended to save enough money to get out, go to college, and enter politics. That was my rating. After I'd been in a few years, I became a gunner's mate. Promotion was slow in that days, so I was a seaman for about 2 years before I got to be a third class. Well, it was not an electronic Navy. Everything was manual horsepower, or arm power, whatever it was. We didn't have all those instruments that were so hard to run, electronic instruments. We didn't have radar in those days. So things were pretty much what line of sight, what you could see with your eyes, is what you saw. It was my first ship, and I stayed aboard it for 10 years. Well, it was our newest battleship when I went in the Navy. The length of 2 football fields, and too wide to fit in 1 football field. And we had, when we had our aviation unit, we had 1,500 men, so it was a small city. I mentioned I went in the Navy in 32. I went aboard the ship in 33. So I'd been on the ship for 8 years. I was kind of a senior person on there at the time. Now, in 1940, the main fleet moved from the West Coast to be stationed in Hawaii. That was supposed to be a warning to the Japanese that we were close at hand. But we knew there were tensions between the United States and Japan, but there was a peace negotiation going on in December. So we were kind of relaxed, thinking, well, if the talks break down, we've got trouble. But as long as the talks are alive, why, there's still a hope for peace. We were overly optimistic. Yes, well, in those days there were no satellites, and radar was not developed. So the only thing we knew that was going on was what you could see with the naked eye. Now, we had scouting planes that if the weather was okay, we could go out and find out what's around us. But that morning, I went through about 5 stages. And the first stage was surprise. You know, we were not expecting it. We did not heed any warning we had. First Japanese plane I saw was flying in my direction, low and slow. And I could almost see the whites of the pilot's eyes. When he got the right angle, his machine gunners cut loose. But he didn't bank far enough, and so the bullets went over my head and dug a trench behind. I was scared. I was afraid the next pilot that come across would be a little more accurate. There was no place to hide, out in the, just open. And then the next emotion I experienced was anger. We had plenty of warning that this shouldn't have happened. And I was angry that our military and political leaders let us down on that. And at that point, I made a resolve. If I ever got in a position of authority in the Navy, we'd be on the alert, we'd never get caught again. But the main thing that happened that morning was the magnificent behavior of the men. About the first 11 minutes, there were 2,000 killed. And there was considerable disorder. But every man, without any thought about his own life, did the right thing instinctively. So we had a lot of heroes. In fact, I think everybody was a hero that morning that I saw in action. And I feel that way about the military today. They're all heroes. Sometimes I say that if we decorated the people that deserved it, the Department of Defense would have to buy a ore factory in Utah, a cotton field in Japan, and a dye factory in New York to mold the medals and the ribbons that our people deserve. Yes, my ship was struck with 9 aerial torpedoes and sunk pretty quickly. Now, a lot of people don't realize that Pearl Harbor is a shallow harbor, and there was only 40 feet of water under us. It was only 40 feet deep. There was only about 6 feet of water under us. So it sunk down in the mud in just a few minutes, and then everything above the water line was on fire. So that's all I could do. All of our equipment was out of order. So I borrowed a fire hose from the ship next to us and tried to put out the fire. I knew we had live ammunition on topside, and I tried to keep the flames away from that ammunition. Yes, while I was manning this fire hose, I saw bodies, many of my friends lying around. So we had fireproof lanyards and name tags. I went around memorizing the name tags with the idea of writing to their parents to know what happened in the last moments. The fires were all about noon. One of my friends was badly burned, so I went to the hospital to see him. And I saw these people, maybe nearly 100, in suspension, blind, hair burned off, most of the bodies burned. And so I took a notebook, went up and down the line, and said, if you will give me your parents' address and dictate a short paragraph, I'll see that you get it. So that's where I spent the afternoon of the 7th, was taking names and sending letters to the parents. Well, I was really surprised that there was no complaints, no criticism. They were cheerful, optimistic. Most of them said, now, don't worry, I'm going to be all right. I'll be home Christmas. So that was the amazing thing, how cheerful they were. Yes, the Pearl Harbors Association that was organized after the war had a motto, remember Pearl Harbor, keep America alert. Now, for my own motto, I've added, keep America alert and strong. In 1983, President Reagan made a speech in which the theme of it was peace through strength. And he coined a small, short phrase that everybody should memorize, I think, and it was, weakness invites aggression. Keep America strong. So I feel that was the main lesson that comes out of Pearl Harbor, that we've got to keep alert, we've got to keep strong. In fact, I talked to quite a few students, and I tell them, you're the leaders of tomorrow. You're the taxpayers, you're the voters, you're the legislators. Please remember, keep America strong. I mentioned earlier that I saw a sign the other day that said, don't even think about parking here. And so I want to see America kept so strong that no dictator or aggressive government will even think about attacking us. Well, I think I can be described as a realist. And December 6th, the day before, I had a job to do. I did it. The day of the battle, I had a job to do, and I did it. The day after the battle, I had a job to do, and I do it. So what happened yesterday is history. I can't do too much about what happens tomorrow. So I live every day at a time. And I've had a rich life, an enjoyable life. So the war was just another act of history to me. My ship was salvaged, and so it took a year and a half, so I had to stay with it. I was the postmaster on the ship, and so my duties went on even though the ship was sunk. I got orders to a new battleship, the South Dakota. Came back to Washington, D.C. to go to school. When I finished my class, They needed an instructor, so they pulled me out of the class, and I rode out the war here in Washington, D.C. Yes, I think by that time the war was over. I had quite a bit of service, and the Korean War came on just shortly after that. I had a position as a commanding officer of a ship during the Korean War, so that was an enjoyable tour of duty that I had. As far as the military is concerned, I think that we learned a lot of lessons, but I'm not sure they're being passed on to the new generations. And one of the things that I did was, I said, made a resolve, if I ever got in a position of authority, we'd never be caught like that. Now, I feel that leaders who have not had combat experience are too optimistic. So I would not allow anybody in a high decision-making position that hadn't been in combat. They're realists. Yes, you know, this is, it's hard to reach a generation that has not been in combat with the facts. So I think the only thing I would do is just to re-emphasize what I said earlier. Remember Pearl Harbor, keep America alert and strong. And I add to that, in cyberspace, in space, in the skies, on the sea, on the ground, under the sea, we must keep America strong. Well, about the only decoration you could earn in peacetime was a Good Conduct Medal. So that's the first medal I got. Then, of course, after 4 years, you got another medal. But I was not covered with medals. I picked up a few more during the war, but I didn't have that much going into it. I'd become a Christian in 1935. So I'd been a Christian for 6 years. And during the height of the attack, there was a gasoline tanker across the harbor about 400 yards from me. Had a capacity of 6 million gallons. The Japanese sent in 75 fighters, and they tried to sink this tanker with their machine guns. I was pretty sure that they were going to be successful. So my conversation during that time was, Lord, I'll see you in a minute. And when that minute was over, I expected to be another minute. So I had great anticipation of moving into heaven pretty rapidly and experienced the greatest peace that I've ever had in my life, just in that moments of thinking I was going to be in heaven the next moment. Yeah, my name is Jim Downing. I retired from the Navy after 24 years service. And I went to work for an organization called the Navigators after I retired. Supposedly I retired from them in 1983, but nobody knows it except me. I'm 103 years old and still on the road a lot of the time. Yeah, my name is Jim Downing. I spent 24 years in the Navy, retired in 1956. I spent my first 10 years aboard the battleship West Virginia. During the Korean War, I commanded the USS Patapsco. After 24 years, I got retired on a physical discharge. I went to work for an organization called the Navigators. I still work for them at age 103. Yeah, say that again, please.
What's your connection to Pearl Harbor?
Oh, yes. The Japanese attack in 1941 was directed primarily at the battleships, so the Japanese could get on with the capture of the Philippines. So my battleship was the newest at West Virginia, took 9 aerial torpedoes, sunk in shallow water, and everything above the waterline burned. There were estimated 86,000 military people in Hawaii that morning. That includes the Marines, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard and the Navy. As far as I know, if I find out there's only less than 1,000 of us alive. The oldest survivor is 105. I'll be 104 in August, so we travel around together some, have a great time together. It's the two oldest survivors.